Welcome to the Region Free Gamers podcast. Today we have a need for F-Zero. Hello everyone, welcome to the Region Free Gamers podcast, the podcast fluent in gaming. My name is Paul Romalo. With me today, out of Rhode Island, Arnaldo Perez.
I have a need, Paul, and it's a need for rotating background layers.
Out of the Netherlands, Geoff Ivats.
Hey, hi guys.
And out of the Bronx, Anthony Arriaga.
BDX, dinner parties suck.
Oh, dude. So, did they eventually serve the dinner?
We finally had dinner, I would say, around 10:30.
Oh my god!
Yeah. 10:30, man.
Oh,
but let me just say,
god.
It was an amazing meal. It would have been even better at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh
Yes.
my god.
That's awesome.
So the couple you were having, or the people you were I don't even know if it's a couple, but the people you were having dinner with. So just to backpedal here for a second, Anthony went to a dinner party that was akin to season 4 Office episode, the dinner party.
It was...
So did things eventually calm down or what?
Yeah, everything. It was just like this very passive-aggressive air to things the entire day. So, like, he would, like, his girlfriend would be like, hey, are you going to start doing this? And he was like, no. And then it was just silence in the room. It was just like... And it was like, I was telling Paul, I was like, you ever go out with like another couple that's going through some stuff and you come home and your wife or your girlfriend's like, we're good, right? Like, we're okay, right? That was me when we got home at like 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, it's like, I don't know if we're good, but we're not that. So
I've had that discussion after we watch a movie where a couple argues a lot, and if they're really good actors, it's like kind of uncomfortable.
Right.
And so we'll finish watching the movie, and I'll look at my wife, and I'm like, we're good, right? That's how it is. And she's like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Okay, good.
Like I think it was last week, just flipping through channels on the TV, and the breakup was on with Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dude.
And
yeah,
that's one of those movies where you can't stop watching it, but when you're watching it, you start to cringe because you're kind of like, yeah, don't do that, man. No, get the lemons. Just get the fucking lemons.
And it's not even the good kind of cringe, like watching The Dinner Party, for example, right? Like,
yes. That one's too real. It's like, this could happen tomorrow.
Yeah. So I don't know that we're here necessarily to discuss dinner parties. That just kind of happened. We're actually here and very excited to be here because we're going to be talking about F-Zero. This is one of the fastest gaming franchises in history. I absolutely love it. But it's not so fast that we can't take a moment to say thank you to everyone for listening. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the show, tell a friend and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. 5 stars, please.
Yeah.
Nothing would make us happier in these unprecedented times. One other thing, too, that I wanted to ask you guys about before we get to F-Zero. So I've got a little bit of a problem, and it's a problem that I touched on with Arnie during our Fire Emblem episode, and I need to know if you guys encountered the same thing. So I'm doing research on F-Zero. And by the way, I thought the research on F-Zero, because it's not that many games, I thought it would be quick. No, it was not quick. Yeah, exactly. Like 7 or 8 pages later, I'm like, dear God, there's a lot to this game, or this game series anyway. So yeah, during the course of research, it turns out that the website that I checked the most, and like more than Wikipedia, more than Moby Games or anything, is eBay.
Oh, good.
This happened during Fire Emblem. It happened during like TurboGrafx a little bit less. I did the outline for that one, but I already know all the values of those games like off by heart, so whatever. But like, good God, man, there's like when you're doing the research, there's so many references to other games and like these rare collectible rabbit holes to go down, and I just want to buy all of it. Like, does that happen to you guys?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
all
sure.
the time. And it's happened to me. We're doing a future episode that I'm writing an outline for right now. And one of the things that I always hate when it happens, it's like I'll be reading an article about a game, and then like towards the end, like flippantly, somebody will be like, "Oh yeah, and there's this like $10,000 gold cartridge variant of this like obscure Japanese game that existed." And I'm like, well, I need to see it now. So like,
of course,
I spent like 30 minutes just frantically Googling like gold cartridge X game, like show me this, and it'll invariably be like somebody's like shitty flip phone picture that they took in like 2001 through like a stained glass window into like some like destroyed video game store. Like, there it is.
Oh my god. It must add at least like an hour or more to my total research time is going over this stuff. Like for F-Zero, first of all, there are there's a very expensive F-Zero game out there. We'll get to that later. I'll leave you guys in suspense as to which one it is.
I think I know the one, but yeah, it's
I think
crazy
I think
prices.
you know too. I think you know too. But no spoilers, Geoff.
No.
So during the course of research, eventually I got into this like Nintendo e-reader rabbit hole because apparently, I know, right? First of all, I didn't even know that this e-reader existed. It's this accessory for the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, I remember.
I didn't remember this at all. Which is to say, I didn't know about it at all. There's a difference between remembering and being ignorant. So I'm like, Nintendo e-reader, and so I start reading about it, and I'm reading about the F-Zero ones and so on, and then it turns out that obviously, like, I'm going to then start looking up which e-reader cards are the most expensive ones.
Of course.
And apparently there was a promotional E3 e-reader pack of cards that was distributed, I think it was in 2002. And the Kirby card in that pack is the most expensive card. So I obviously straight to eBay, right? The Kirby card alone sold for well over $200.
Jesus Christ.
And that's just the card. And there's some guy selling the full unopened pack of cards, like the E3 promo cards. And the price that he's got on it, and I like, you know how it is with eBay, right? People just like, this is $1 million, but make me an offer. And so this guy's selling it for $2,000 Canadian.
Christ.
So like, $50 American or whatever, right?
It's about right.
But I'm like, oh my God, like these collectibles are just, they're out of control.
Yeah, the only thing I remember about the e-reader pack, because I had heard about it before, I knew about it because of Mario 3 on Game Boy Advance, and I think you could get like extra levels with the e-reader packs, but it was never like, this is how obsessed like we were with even shitty technology back then, is that like, it's not like you scan a card and it's like, oh, here's your level. It's like, there's an entire pack of like 7 or 8 cards and you have to scan them all in order because there's not enough data on each card to just have a whole level on it. So you have to scan every single card for one level.
That's amazing. It reminds me of like the old computer punch cards, like in the late 60s, I guess we just couldn't do better in 2002.
It was what we had at the time.
I had the Barcode Battler.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And that was just finding any barcodes you had lying around the house and hoping it springs a surprise. That's
great.
Fun. Yeah.
That technology I like, though. Like, I wish that was still around.
Yeah, because all you do is scan like regular barcodes from all your household products or whatever. Sure. I wonder what would happen. Geoff, did you scan barcodes from video games?
I think a lot of magazine barcodes. I'd like to think I didn't cut out barcodes from boxes, but I probably did.
Did you have to cut them out, or could you just scan them like from the box itself?
Well, you had to swipe them across, so it depends what kind of size they were and where they were on the item.
Oh,
it wasn't a scanner. It was like a credit card swipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. We didn't have scanning technology back then. That involved like lasers and stuff.
Yeah.
We were still working on the wheel.
We used to have I remember like you would send away for stuff and you had to send away the proof of purchase and you'd have to cut out
Yeah.
the barcode.
Yeah.
This all just reminds me of Monster Rancher, because I remember as a kid, like when I got Monster Rancher 2, I think it was, on the PlayStation, and it was like, oh, how do I get new monsters? And it was like, oh, open the disc tray and like put in a CD. And I was just like, first of all, can I, like, I didn't know I could open the disc tray while a game was inside of it.
Right,
I thought,
that was like a
PlayStation
big
would
no-no.
explode. Like, I was like, fuck this. This is a terrible idea. But then I would like just put in all my like crappy emo CDs that I had in the early 2000s and get like terrible monsters. I'm like, yes.
So the monsters were all very sad.
Yeah, all the monsters were just depressed when they came out.
Their girlfriends all just broke up with them. Oh man, that's awesome. Well, anyhow, we should probably get to the star of the show here, which is F-Zero. So I guess the first thing we'll do is we'll start off with explaining what F-Zero is, for those who don't know. It's a futuristic racing game series. It was born on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1991. It's largely credited with being the game that invented the futuristic racing subgenre of racing games. And I don't think there's any real debate to be had about that, right? Like, I'm sure that there were kind of futuristic racing games before it, but none of them really popularized it like F-Zero. Am I wrong here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like the first one that popularized that aesthetic of like hover cars and, you know, sort of like fast-paced, like real big turn tracks and stuff like that. That was the first one I remember hearing of.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Now, as far as the story of the series, like with most racing games, you know, I would say the story matters a little bit more in F-Zero, but it's a racing game, so I mean, it doesn't really matter. It starts in the year 2560, and this part kind of rings a little bit true here. Intergalactic multi-billionaires invent a dangerous sport that they can gamble on, which, of course, right? Because that sounds exactly like what a multi-billionaire would do in 2560. Like, man, I got a lot of money. Let's gamble. Let's create this super expensive hover car racing series so I can sit in a dark room, smoke, you know, galactic cigars.
Smoke cigars.
Hey, you think your humans are good? You got to try these things out.
And funnily enough, it actually reminded me of, and Arnie told me that he's seen this, which is the anime movie Redline. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah.
As soon as I read this description of F-Zero, I was like, Redline. That's one of the reasons I liked Redline so much. It's got this cool, almost F-Zero vibe to it.
Yeah, that was. I saw that on the outline, and that was a little bit of a rabbit hole. Not gonna say I jumped fully in, but I definitely put my foot in. Started looking up some videos, and I was like, "Wow, this is intense."
Yeah, man. Yeah,
super stylized. One of the last like fully hand drawn anime movies, not involving computers or anything like that.
Yeah,
it looks really, really cool. But
it looks incredible.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, Geoff, you haven't seen it?
No, it was only through what you posted up. I can't believe I hadn't come across it before.
I'm impressed that I was able to come up with an anime Geoff hadn't heard of. That's pretty awesome. So, aside from its kind of futuristic comic book aesthetic, the other big drawing for F-Zero is speed. There's no other game prior to F-Zero, and we're talking even the graphically superior games in the arcade that quite captured the feel of speed that F-Zero did. And that would be kind of its calling card throughout the whole series. Every game in that series feels super, super fast. And it all started with the first one. So, before we get to the SNES F-Zero, I guess the first question I want to ask, we'll start with you, Anthony. What was your first experience with F-Zero?
My first, seeing the game, I remember seeing it before I actually got a Super Nintendo. But it was like different. Like, you didn't even understand what Mode 7 was. And you're seeing this thing, and you're in your mind, you're thinking, have I not seen this already? Has this not happened already? but it was definitely something not jarring, but it was something like that was so impressive, like tech wise, like what is this? Like this is crazy. Like the way the screen, you can actually see the whole level, you know, the whole track. Yeah. But when I finally got to play it though, and I didn't get to play it till about when I finally got a Super Nintendo, so I probably played this game myself with time, like back in like 98. So when I finally got to sit down and play it, I was so impressed at how easy it was to just jump in and play this game. And this game was already like almost a 10-year-old game. We've already, at this point, we had seen way more impressive graphic games. So to be able to sit down and play this game and really appreciate F-Zero was just, it was cool, man. It's really cool when you go back and you revisit these older games and just see like how well they've held up. But it was definitely a sense of like, it was something I hadn't seen before in terms of just the fact that there were so many different things going on while you're just racing the game, while you're just racing. You know, other things that you have to keep track of, like your power meters and all this stuff that weren't really introduced in that way. So when it made every lap so tense. Everything was so tense in this game.
That's kind of the theme with that game, and even more so with the subsequent games. They introduced some gameplay mechanics in some of the later games that even increase that tension more. What about you, Geoff?
Yeah, I think it's one of the few like core SNES games that I didn't play till quite late on. None of my friends had it. I didn't pick it up. And when I did play it, it was probably quite late in the day. So I just felt like, I prefer Mario Kart. It's multiplayer. I can have more fun with it. This is quite brutal. And then I didn't play it again. And it wasn't until probably, I would think, the late 2000s when I picked up a kart-only copy for myself, back when retro games were dirt cheap. And I think I completed it back to front. I managed to kind of understand the mechanics, and I really enjoyed it. It was a series that, for Nintendo, I've always enjoyed their consoles, but it's a series that always kind of eluded me till late on in a console's life cycle. I can't explain why, but it was always one of those franchises that just kind of, it would go, it would kind of like zoom past me, and I'd have to catch up with it towards the end.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. I would have assumed because you were kind of I don't want to say early adopter, but like the SNES was basically your choice in that era. I would have, like, I wondered if F-Zero might have been something that pushed you in that direction, just because it was such a kind of technical showpiece at launch.
Yeah, I think if I'd seen it running, say like on a there was a shop in my high street which would always have a couple of monitors in the shop window with a console attached to them. If I'd seen F-Zero running versus a Master System, which is what I would have had at the time, I would have been like, this is it. This is selling me. It definitely would have sold me, but something else sold me on the SNES, and I can't remember which game it was, but something a friend had. But yeah, F-Zero is stunning. Even today, I played it yesterday just to get quickly reacquainted. It's beautiful.
I remember as a kid, like, that was the game. It was actually the only game that made me kind of wish I had an SNES instead of a Genesis. Yeah. Just because it captured that feeling of, like, I didn't notice anything about the Mode 7, for example, right? I think I might have just been a little bit too young to kind of be like, oh, wow, what are they doing with the graphics? Mm-hmm. It was more like, oh my God, this game is so fast. Yeah. That was it. I was just obsessed with the fact that it was that fast. And it was only in reading about it over the past little while that I was like, oh, wow, they're doing like so many cool little tricks here that, you know, not something I noticed as a kid, but it all kind of adds up. It's really all very cleverly done. Yeah. Now, Arnie, obviously you were still a glint in your father's eye when this game first came out. So which F-Zero game did you play first? I'm going to guess it was one of the GBA ones.
You close. I feel really good now that everybody else is like, yeah, I didn't play it till much later because I was sort of the same way. Like, when I got an SNES, and when all my friends had SNESs, it was like, the SNES launched with, I think, 2 games.
Yeah,
and it was F-Zero and
5 here.
Yeah. I just remember, like, of all the launch games, there was one that everybody had, and it was Super Mario World. And, like, I did not hear about F-Zero at all. So I think, like, I did play the first game first, but it was on an emulator. I think I played it, like, much later. Like, it was that moment. It was that moment in every child's life when they realize you can play games on the internet, and they're like, I want to download everything. Like, I want every single
everything.
Game. And F-Zero was one of the ones that I remember downloading and just being like, wow, I really suck at this game. Like, I'm terrible. And then after that, I think I think the only F-Zero game that I currently own is one of the GBA ones. I think it's GP Legends. Yeah,
that would be, out of the two, at least for the American releases, that would be the one to own instead of Maximum Velocity. But you know, we'll get to that later. We'll get to what the reason for that is. So Geoff, let me ask you, between Wipeout and F-Zero, so and you know what's coming, but I just want to know what your opinion is on how much better F-Zero is, like on a scale of like 5 times better to 10 times better.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
Well, I'm not gonna satisfy your macabre, viewpoint on Wipeout. A great British game. Wipeout. I did a little bit of watching again of Wipeout. I wanted just to make sure before I entered this chat, I really had my ducks in line. Right, okay. And Wipeout, I had the demo of it. It was tough. And it was brutal. It's like, as soon as you hit a wall, you came down to a grinding halt. Whereas F-Zero, you hit a wall and you go bouncing around like a pinball and you've lost the race almost. So they're both quite brutally hard games and require you to be perfect. I've always preferred the weaponry aspect of Wipeout. That brings a nice different element to it. Basically, it makes it like a Mario Kart, doesn't it? Really.
Yeah.
But Wipeout took many iterations even for me to really enjoy it. It did take time to become a great game. Whereas F-Zero, for me, is instantly great. I think that's a big difference, and I think that that studio up in Liverpool that obviously is now gone, and Psygnosis, they were able to give them time and give them money and give them space, and they believed in it. Whereas F-Zero, and we are going to go into this, I guess, it has that tech demo feel to it where Nintendo didn't return to it. Whereas Wipeout, they kept wanting to make it better, and I think that's why overall I think I'll always prefer Wipeout. Just because there's so much to it. Like, the HD collection on the PS4 is phenomenal. But yeah, I think the starting routes, F-Zero is by far and away more enjoyable.
What an enjoyably diplomatic answer.
That was really good.
Thanks.
I almost want to applaud. I mean, the opinion, don't get me wrong, the opinion is incorrect, right? Like, F-Zero is much better.
I mean, all of that just to avoid saying that he truly prefers Roll Cage is
Hey man, don't sleep on Roll Cage.
Roll Cage?
Yeah, that was a great game.
Great game.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting way to put it, because I remember the first time I played Wipeout, and we're not going to get into too much of a digression here because there's a lot to go over, but I remember the first time I played Wipeout, the thing that struck me the most, I was like, wow, this looks really cool. You know, it's really, oh wait, I hit a wall and I stopped.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm done here. Because it just felt like the ship, the hover car, whatever you want to call it, it just felt kind of heavy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, the acceleration wasn't quite as snappy as I wanted it to be. And yeah, it's like you said, Geoff, if you kind of hit a wall, then, you know, you just come to a grinding halt, like you said. And for me, that was always kind of the big difference, which, you know, it is what it is. What I'll have to do is I'll have to try out the HD collection for PS4. Like, I guess the main question I have is, in Wipeout, when you hit a wall now, Geoff, like, do you still come to that grinding halt, or is there a little bit more forgiveness?
Yeah, there's a lot more forgiveness. I mean, if you're going to do the time trials and you want to get those big or those very small times, then yeah, it's going to completely destroy you. But I think it's more forgiving now.
And the Omega Collection is PSVR compatible, so you can do that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank goodness!
Yes.
Another game I can barf to.
Yeah, you can vomit all over your couch.
All right. On that disgusting note, let's take a little break, and when we come back, we'll start off with the Super Nintendo F-Zero. All right, everyone, we're back. So, F-Zero, the OG for the SNES. This game, it was released as a launch title for the Super Famicom, and that was in Japan in November of 1990. And it was also a launch title for the SNES in North America in August of 1991. And funnily enough, I actually couldn't even get a release date for the PAL. Like, it literally just said, or Wikipedia anyway, just said 1992.
Some guy just dropped it off in a retail store one day, and they were like, here you go.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, is, man, like, to not even give us a month for the PAL release, that's so disrespectful. I don't even know what to think about that. But anyhow, produced by Mr. Shigeru Miyamoto. Glad Ozzy's not here.
The god among men, Miyamoto-san.
Funnily enough, in reading through some of the interviews and stuff, Miyamoto, if you want to find his fingerprint, like the one kind of big thing that he did with the game, is he's actually credited for removing the invisible wall that's around the track. So originally when they were designing this game, you're driving around the track, and if you hit the wall, then you hit the wall. You can't go off the track. Mm-hmm. And Miyamoto was like, no, get rid of that. And so they got rid of it, and then bam, it opens up all these possibilities where you can like jump to different parts of the track if you hit a jump and so on and so forth, which ends up being one of F-Zero's calling cards. So, you know, good idea by him. You know, one of his few good ideas, really.
I mean, F-Zero being the most successful franchise he's ever worked on, it's really a wonder that he had this great idea.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Credit to Nintendo for being so charitable as to employ him. So, you know, good for them. Directed by Kazunobu Shimizu. He decided on the futuristic theme. Funnily enough, the vehicles and the theme, especially the vehicles, were actually influenced by the American movie Batman, released at the time, the one starring Michael Keaton, the one with lineups going around the block. That, like, Anthony, you remember that,
I remember
right?
that.
Yeah. So, yeah, he saw the Batmobile and he's like, I want that in my game. And thus, that's why the vehicles in the game kind of sort of resemble the Batmobile.
Do you ever have a moment when you learn a piece of information and it completely, like something clicks in your mind and you're like, everything makes sense now. Like, my third eye has opened and like I can see the space between spaces. Like, that was me when I read this piece of information. I was like, how did I not see this before?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it fits like a puzzle piece right in there. Programmed by Yasunari Ishida, who stayed with Nintendo until 2012. He's got quite the CV as well. He programmed Mario 64, Wii Sports, and because not everybody can bat 1,000, he also did Pokemon Stadium.
How dare you?
Art direction by Takaya Imamura, and his style can also be seen in all of the subsequent F-Zero games, and he also did all the design for the Star Fox games. So you can definitely kind of see the resemblance between the two. I'm a big fan of his work, minus Slippy Toad and Peppy Hair, who can just fuck right off. Honestly,
cool.
Those guys are just... I'm sorry, Geoff. Those guys, they need to go. Listen, Peppy, I'll do the barrel roll, when I goddamn want to do the barrel roll. Okay, stop telling me to do a barrel roll.
I know,
Thank
Peppy
you.
keeps pulling rank on you like all the time. I wonder.
Well, to me, he's just like a backseat driver.
Yeah, he kind
right?
of
Like,
is.
who would like who's driving around in Japan with their old father, and the father's like, "Hey, watch out! There's a red light up there," and thinks, "Wow, what a great idea! I should put that in a video game." Anyway, sound design by. Okay, no, really though, my dad used to do that. Like, I would approach, like, there's a red light down the road, and my dad would lean over, "Hey, watch out for that red light." And I'm like, "Really, Dad? Thanks."
I'm starting to realize
Thanks.
that your hatred of Peppy Hare, I think, goes a little bit deeper than just the game.
Oh my God, Peppy Hare is my father.
All coming together now.
Realizations on the Region Free Gamers podcast.
Therapy at its best.
And it's cheapest.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Sound design by Naoto Ishida and Yumiko Kanki. Mainly notable, actually, just from reading it, because though they did arrange the soundtrack in F-Zero, which is a much beloved soundtrack, actually, after the 16-bit era, they just vanished. I think as with... So we've encountered a little bit of a theme here on the show, just doing research. A lot of the women who worked on these games in the 16-bit era, what I'm finding is that they just get married and then they vanish.
Yeah.
Like it's like they're just locked into their house and like, no, you cannot work on these children's games anymore. And they're like, okay, yes,
Yeah.
of course.
I know we definitely talked about the fact that specifically with Japanese developers, it's really like, oh, I guess I interned for a summer and like did one of the most beloved soundtracks of all time. Now I'm like a stockbroker or something. Like, what happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, with Miss Yumiko Kanki, I'm pretty sure that's what happened with her. Because eventually you can kind of see a different surname for her, which indicates that she gets married, and then she just vanishes. And Naoto Ishida actually moved on to more of like the technological aspect of sound design.
Okay.
So not with Nintendo, but working with other software companies and so on and so forth. But great soundtrack before they left. So the actual game itself, this pretty much continued Nintendo's new... They basically kind of were developing a tradition of releasing a game at launch that was essentially like a tech demo for the system.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really put the pieces together on this one until reading about F-Zero, but you know, it originally started actually with the NES, where they released the system, and the big thing with the NES at that time was smooth side-scrolling.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you kind of think to yourself, smooth side-scrolling, like, well, yeah, like, how hard is that? No, actually, it's really friggin' hard, because I don't know if you guys remember, like, your average home computer, you couldn't have side-scrolling games on it.
Yeah.
Like, you could, but they were super, super choppy. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it was always like you'd hit the edge of the screen and it would either like slowly scroll like the next background, or it like blink out of existence and pop back in with another.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so funnily enough, the side-scrolling and the smoothness of it actually a really big deal. And so Mario Brothers, and I guess to an extent Excitebike, were kind of like the showpieces for that ability of the system, which ended up just transforming video games completely. Then you have Mario 64, which was 3D, Wii Sports, which is, you know, the motion controls. And I put in my notes here 1-2 Switch, which its technological innovation was wasting our time. As far as F-Zero is concerned, the entire structure of the game is actually based around what was known as Graphical Mode 7. So we'll do just like a little bit of a kind of layman's explanation here of Mode 7. Basically, kind of to simplify, you had graphical modes 0 to 6 on the SNES, and those were basically different types of backgrounds with different numbers of layers that could be used. So Mode 0, for example, I don't have any example of a game that used it. I really should have looked it up. But basically, Mode 0 has the fewest amount of colors, but it could enable 4 different background layers. And then mode 1, which actually was the most common, it had access to more colors than mode 0, but only 3 layers, which for the purpose of the SNES and other systems, it was basically like a background, a foreground, and then a heads-up display, a HUD. So, skipping on to mode 7, a different kind of background mode, just one single layer. So where the other modes have multiple layers to create some depth and to move your character around over a foreground, mode 7 was just one background layer with up to 256 colors. But this single background layer, it could be rotated, it could be scaled, it could be skewed, or any combination of the 3. With F-Zero, for example, the mode 7 background is actually the track itself. So it's basically one giant bitmap. They draw a track on it, and they have kind of like a black border around the track to give it kind of like that floating look once you scale it. So then they skew it so that it's wider at the bottom and then thinner at the top to kind of create that 3D perspective. And then they scale the entire background forwards, I guess backwards, but in order to create the illusion of moving forwards. Such a cool little idea. And if you guys need other examples of mode 7 and how obvious it is, funnily enough, I was actually looking this up and I found out it made so much sense after looking it up. Castlevania 4, for example, you fight against the Golem boss, and it's the only boss fight, I looked it up, where the background is black. And I'm like, yes, of course, because the Golem itself is a background. That's how they're able to scale him. Every time you hit him, he gets a little bit smaller. And then when you do defeat the Golem, he just kind of he just increases in size until he fills the whole screen and then kind of explodes. So
it was, I don't know. Is it weird to me? I'm going to be honest with you. I never knew any of this. I thought mode 7 was just mode 7 because some guy thought it sounded cool. I didn't really think that there was anything behind it. So when I started reading this part of the outline and you were like mode 0 through 6, and I was like, oh, here's where Paul makes that joke where it's like, what happened to mode 0 through 6? Now we have mode 7. And then I was like, oh no, there's a real explanation to all of this and I'm just an idiot.
I didn't know there was other modes before this.
No, you know what? Honestly, me neither. I really thought mode 7 was just kind of like a lame marketing thing. And when I mean lame, I mean lame. Sega had blast processing, right?
Badass.
And then Super Nintendo has mode 7, which it was actually a utilitarian term, not a marketing term. So who knew, right?
I mean, me now.
You know what? So Anthony, for you as a kid, blast processing or mode 7? Which team were you on?
Well, I was, by default, I was on blast processing. But like that meme of that guy walking with his girlfriend, but he looks over his shoulder and he sees this other girl walking. So I'm walking with blast processing, but I was checking out that mode 7.
Now, actually, so over in Europe land, Geoff, were you even, did they even use the term blast processing there? Was that just a North American thing?
Oh, I think we got all of that marketing PR bullshit. It all came our way. Emotion engine or chip, all that stuff. We get all of that. Now, you reminded me. I was I went on a holiday to in Indonesia. I was in Bali. And I went past a shop that had 6D movies. I'm like, 6D? What the hell happened to 4 and 5D? What, they've just jumped to 6?
This is too many Ds, man.
There's too many Ds in that movie. Yeah, but never be surprised by the power of marketing, because blast processing still sounds amazing to me. It sounds amazing.
I know, right? I laugh at it, tongue in cheek, right? Because it's a relic of the era. But it still sounds pretty cool, actually.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
I would say the emotion engine was the climax of that particular terrible marketing movie. So I wrote this question down as kind of like a joke, but now I'm amusing myself and I have to ask you, Geoff. So on a previous episode,
Yeah.
I wish I could remember which one exactly, so people could listen just to hear it from the horse's mouth. But you confirmed on a previous episode that Europe actually has cars.
Big if true.
Which
big if true.
Yeah, like mind blowing.
Yeah, no, but I think I've also kind of educated people to know that we also have malls and Blockbuster videos. So I feel like I'm doing a massive service for Europe here. So what's the question, Paul? What's the question?
The question is whether Europe also has hover cars like in F-Zero.
Well, yeah, but Germany have been making those for years. So
yeah,
you've got them.
we don't talk about them.
Audis. Yeah, we just don't let you know. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm glad to know that at least this technology is out there, and eventually we'll co-opt it. We'll steal it. I asked my wife yesterday. I said, so, because she was kind of looking over my shoulder as I was writing the outline, and she's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Hey, if you could pick one European country to develop the hover car, which one would it be?" And she was like, "Oh, Sweden." Wait, no, Germany.
That's what happens when you go on the Autobahn. Your car becomes a hover car.
Yep.
So anyway, back to F-Zero. The game itself was absolutely like stunning for its time. Other racing games, they could actually create hills by using various graphical tricks, and you'll see them as far back as Rad Racer on the NES. Sega would use kind of like stacked tiles or sprites, and that's a trick that they used as early as Space Harrier even. But the thing about the stacked tiles, or really any of the other techniques that were used in racing games, is that none of them could hit that magical 60 frames per second that F-Zero did. And that 60 frames per second is truly the secret sauce to F-Zero. Because if you introduce any kind of choppiness to that game, bam, your sense of speed is just gone.
Yeah.
At least I've never played F-Zero at a lower frame rate, but to me, that's what would happen, because it feels so fast, and part of that is just that it feels so smooth.
I was just going to say that, and this will play more into the later games, but they did so much with very little. I feel like they could not, make this game like really flashy, really big, sort of scenic, sort of stuff, because they were using the Mode 7 and to keep it at that smooth 60 frames. But there's something like very eye-catching about that game still, even with its minimalist look.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's an interview with the developers where they mentioned that they showed it off at a trade show before the Super Famicom's release, and they had 2 Super Famicom's test systems set up with F-Zero, and the lineups to play it were huge. Mm-hmm. And the trade show is like other industry people, so they're all very kind of it's not like a consumer going up and playing it. It's people who are like programmers and developers. And they're all playing F-Zero, and their jaws are just on the floor. They're like, "Oh my god, are these polygons? Like, did you guys crack the code?" Like, and Nintendo, the developers are like Shimizu or Ishida, for example. They'd be like, "No, it's just Mode 7. Like, relax." But also, please enjoy the game.
It's crazy. Like when I was doing some, looking over the notes and doing some research, the development time that they had for this game was so condensed. So to see what they, so for them to come out with something pretty revolutionary in such a small amount of time was alone so impressive.
Yeah. I mean, basically Miyamoto went to them and said, "Hey, this is what Mode 7 is. Show me what you can do with it." And so they were just kind of farting around with it, and were like, "Hey, what if we do this? Do you think that will work?" And it did. And how? Really, I don't want to call it an accident, because obviously it takes talent to find these kind of things. But just hearing the story of it, where they were just kind of like, let's figure out what we can do with it. And then, oh my God, we've just created a beloved racing game just like that. So, just a few of the other, little notes here for F-Zero. Very interestingly, I didn't know about this beforehand, but because of F-Zero's ability to follow a track that was just a single background layer, that was actually the reason that it could have those 180-degree hairpin turns. And it didn't hit me until I was looking it up. Other racing games just didn't do that. You had kind of like a max of a 90-degree turn and, you know, a bunch of gradual turns and so on and so forth, because you're doing kind of tile stacking, and you can't, you know, if you stack tiles and turn 180 degrees, it just kind of creates like, you know, like you're opening a fan and you can see all the different layers of the fan. Whereas if you just have a gradual curve, it keeps it tight and it keeps the illusion looking real. F-Zero didn't even have to do that. It could do like 100% 180 degree turns, and you could jump to other parts of the track, unheard of at the time. It was absolutely crazy. And funnily enough, hover cars, back to the hover cars again, can't stop talking about them. They were used actually because graphically turning wheels was difficult. The developers originally wanted to put wheels on the cars because, you know, Batman. And they're like, you know what? This whole wheel turning thing sucks. I don't even want to try. Let's just have them be hover cars. It's in the future anyway, right?
Yeah.
And there you go, like a beautifully elegant and lazy solution.
Yeah. I mean, they were like, we've already like developed this incredibly innovative and, you know, revolutionary design in using this Mode 7 thing. Like, that's enough innovation for one game, I think.
And I think on one of the interviews I was looking at, when they were talking about the wheels, they said that they'd have to so many frames that they'd have to draw just to get the wheels as they were turning, as the vehicles were turning and stuff.
Yeah.
So removing that, just, you know, it literally cut it down to like from like 100 and something frames to like 4.
Yeah.
They had to fire the wheel drawing guy, but, you know, sacrifice.
Imagine getting that job. Man, imagine getting that job. You're in charge of wheels. And then finding out the next day, like, we don't need you.
Where we're going, we don't need wheels, is what they were saying.
Hey, there we go.
So, unlike most racing games at the time, F-Zero was actually just as much about staying alive as it was winning. The hover cars, they actually have a power meter and they can take damage. So if you run out of power, the ship just, boom, it explodes. Yeah. And for me anyway, I find that this actually complements the speed perfectly because it creates a little bit more tension. It's not just about winning, like you're in second place, but oh crap, my hover car is almost dead. And it's really kind of a nail biter. I don't know. I loved it. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, it was a lot to juggle while you're racing, and it just added to the tension. And it was something that, like I said, it wasn't something that we had seen like that before. So having to manage your health in a racing game, it was kind of a cool thing once you got the hang of it.
Yeah. I find for myself, it kind of depends on the game. Like if I'm playing a simulator, if I'm playing a Gran Turismo kind of game, I think I could probably do without the damage. It looks cool on the car, but then it affects your performance, you know, when you're playing that kind of game. Whereas in a game like F-Zero, you take the damage and it's kind of an all or nothing prospect. The fun, so to speak, is that your car will still perform the way it is intended to with no adverse effects from taking damage. But if you take too much damage, then it's over and you're done, right? Anyway, that's just the way I like to look at it.
I hate it because I'm not good at these games, but I do like, I think for F-Zero, like the way that it plays, it's nice to have that extra level of strategy where it's like, if you're in first, do you play it safe and try not to blow up and risk somebody catching you? Or do you, take those riskier turns that you might not need to and risk blowing up?
Yeah. Yes, very much so. And with F-Zero as well, because of as Anthony mentioned earlier, because of or maybe Geoff, but the pinball nature of hitting objects and obstacles, it actually really introduces another little bit here. Like if you hit another car just right, you can cause them to start careening into stuff and take damage and potentially explode. But I mean, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I would never even try. Because if I tried to hit the other car just right, almost inevitably I'm the one who turns into the pinball and starts going off the walls and stuff.
I found with like the dying, it was a point where I remember there's a couple of tracks where you get really frustrated because even the straights become very narrow. And even if you're in the lead, you start catching up with other cars or other crafts, and you start kind of going, God, actually, like they're almost knowing which way I'm going to go on what side of the track. They're like really trying to mess me around here. And then you'd end up ping-ponging, you blow up, and it's just like, you know what, fuck this shit, I'm out. Like this is utter bollocks. but then you realise, actually, to go through one Grand Prix, it doesn't take much time at all. And you quickly find yourself going again. And I think that's what's so great about that speed, that you feel like you can quickly catch up to where you were last time, and you can make that jump now, or you know how to kind of manage the course better. So it never felt like, God, I'm half an hour down the road here. I'm going to have to, like, I don't know if I can be bothered to put that time in again to get to that track. It was that immediate gratification that I think always pulled me back when I did first start playing it, rather than the kind of like that feeling on Wipeout where you're like, I can't even drive, so this is not for me. At least at F-Zero, that speed kept coming back.
Yeah, that's I don't disagree at all. You know, just to kind of build on that, I was playing GX, F-Zero GX last night, a lot more than I actually expected to, and that was part of it. You know, it could keep you coming back because everything was nice and quick, and also, like you were saying, Geoff, because of the speed, I've never played a game, and this is just talking about F-Zero GX, and I know I'm skipping ahead, but whatever. I've never played a game where I was in last place so frequently and yet completely unworried about it. Because I knew even though I'm in last place, I could hit some boosts and I could hit some, natural boosts on the track, and then bam, like I'm right back in it. The cars are all like in a pack. I never really felt like I was completely out of it. I don't know. It's pretty cool. Yeah. So back to F-Zero, the original again. Gotta mention, first F-Zero game to introduce Captain Falcon.
You mean that guy from Smash?
Stop it. So, originally, actually, Captain Falcon, this was amusing, was supposed to be designed by Ishida to be the Super Famicom's mascot, which is why his color palette actually matches the colors on the Super Famicom buttons, although they dropped the green from his design a little bit later. And eventually they actually just dropped the mascot, the Super Famicom mascot idea altogether. And he just remained in F-Zero, and he made some cameos in some other games, like, who cares about those other games, whatever. And also, I didn't know this, he had a starring role in his own anime series, which was released around the time of the GBA games and F-Zero GX as well. Like, did you guys know about the anime series?
I did not.
No.
But now I'm wondering if it's better than the Fire Emblem anime.
Ooh.
Or the Zelda.
That's a tough one. I'm going to say that the dubbing is better than the Fire Emblem anime, but the Fire Emblem anime is the better one.
Yeah.
Cuz that, oh my god, that Fire Emblem dubbing, good god. I haven't gone back to it, Arnie, since we did that episode, but like I'm just thinking about it now, and I just want to randomly insert clips from it into our show.
It's worth the ride if you're willing to pay the price of admission. I also really enjoy the idea of Nintendo going from like an overweight Italian plumber to this like Judge Dredd looking motherfucker as like the new mascot for their system.
I know, right? And when they pick the fat plumber.
Yeah, they go ultimately. So, but this was actually
and then ends up being the right choice.
Yeah, you got to give the people what they want.
Arnie, you brought up the point I really wanted to make about that, and that was when you look at the comic, it's like, and this is where for me, I don't want to speak badly of Miyamoto and of Nintendo. I don't want to bring out my inner Aussie. But when I look at F-Zero, I like outside of the technicality side of it, I don't really see anything that original. And let me kind of break it down. And this isn't to disparage anything the creators have done, but I guess it's clearly I feel like I can see where they've been influenced. Because basically this is from AD 2000's Judge Dredd. This is where it's from, where people can go around, where the judges can go around blasting away criminals. Of course there would be death games with cars. Of course there would be. So it's like...
It is on theme.
It's on theme. Like, even Captain Falcon, I'm looking at him now, he is Judge Dredd. He's got the whole visor thing going. You can only see the bottom half of his mouth, of his face. He's Judge Dredd. But then also, there's a little bit of like anything about futuristic. There's a little bit of Blade Runner in there. There's a little bit of even I think like The Running Man. If you know that movie about like basically fighting to survive and you win money and all that sort of stuff.
He's no longer Sub-Zero. He's just plain Zero.
Thanks, Paul. That's
Sorry,
right. No,
Geoff.
that's a great movie, isn't it? It's a great movie. But there is, and I guess that's where, like, even the Super Famicom box, it is a comic book cover. So there's either that part of they've gone, right, we've got this thing, let's try and layer something on top of it. Let's just try and make it more than it is because it's essentially a tech demo of a game. Let's try and create something, which is absolutely great. But like, it looks like they've just gone to Judge Dredd creator and go draw us up some characters. And I tried to do some research to see, okay, who really did like make the comic, and if it's Ishida and like they did all the comic, and it's bizarre because in the Super Famicom manual the comic is all in English, so it does make me think that I'm just reading out of a Judge Dredd. Or they've just kind of just copied it frame for frame from a different series. Knowing that now, when I play it again, if I think I'm racing on a background, it's very bizarre. It's kind of like that whole thing of space is endless, and there's billions of light years. I don't even know what that means anymore. My brain doesn't work like that. But it's so as much as I think that all the stuff layered on top isn't too original. What it did, and I'd have to. It sounds like we're talking about one of our battle episodes, but I'm sure if you put me at E3 or whatever in 1990, I would have been, what? This is incredible. This is utterly amazing. Forget all the common stuff on the side. This is too good to be true. So yeah, Judge Dredd, Captain Falcon. I think they're brothers or something for sure.
Yeah, it's great.
I never made the connection myself, but now that you mentioned it, it's like,
but it's great that they even threw the comic book in at the end of the manual just to give you some backstory as to what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Cool, man. Well, I think on that note, we'll take another break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about F-Zero X for the N64. All right, everyone, we're back, and we are back with F-Zero X for the N64, the next F-Zero game to be released on home consoles. F-Zero X released in the second half of 1998, pretty much in all territories, so between July and November for everybody. Obviously, Japan came first, and not a launch title for the N64, not a kind of like tech demo like it was for the SNES, just a straight up great game for the N64. Produced again by Shigeru Miyamoto, and Takuya Imamura again did the art, as he would for all subsequent F-Zero games. Additionally, Tadashi Sugiyama was the director for this one. He's a Nintendo vet. He started out with Ice Climber, and most recently produced Star Fox Zero. It's very interesting to see these directors and programmers from Nintendo. They are lifers, let me tell you. I don't know what Nintendo's doing over
free
there.
Lunches.
If they're just like, free lunches. Here's your bento box. Yeah. So the game itself, F-Zero X, it manages to retain that kind of gritty yet cartoon-like style of the original. I guess much like Judge Dredd, since we were talking about that. Yeah. Kind of a stubborn visual style. Because we did just have Wipeout released shortly before F-Zero. And, for its faults, as far as I'm concerned anyway, Wipeout did look super, super cool and super futuristic. So it's kind of a very Nintendo move to be like, no, you guys can do what you want. We're just going to stick with our cartoons and our Judge Dredd knockoffs. Thank you very much. So F-Zero X did introduce a number of innovations. Hills, the F-Zero on the SNES, because of the Mode 7, it can't have any hills. It's just a single background layer. F-Zero X, on the other hand, hills, loops, it's all over the place. Back on the Super Nintendo, we had 4 vehicles, 4 pilots. Now we've got 30 in F-Zero X. And this was actually kind of a demand by Miyamoto. He's like, look, I don't care what you guys do with the graphics, but we need 60 frames per second and we need 30 cars on the track. That's the demand that I'm making of you. And so the programmers, they took their free lunch and they went off to work. And there you go, man, 30 cars on the track. F-Zero X introduces attacking. So you can attack by using a side attack or a spin attack. And you use this, of course, to knock other racers off the track or damage them. And the side attack, actually, it doubles as a cornering technique with some practice. So when you turn, you start sliding off the track. But if you do a side attack as you're cornering, you can just corner a little bit more tightly. It becomes... what I was reading is it takes practice, but I don't know about you guys. For me, it was just second nature. I'm like, wait, so if I hit the R button, I can corner more tightly? Yeah. Bam. So the boost now in this game, for me, this is kind of like the secret sauce of the game. Because the original F-Zero, it's fast, there's tension with the damage. But F-Zero X would introduce what I think is... anyway, it's my favorite part of the game. So the boost in F-Zero X kind of makes the game into like this nail-biting experience, because when you hit boost in F-Zero X, what it does is it uses up some of your energy meter. And obviously, if your energy meter goes all the way to the bottom, you explode and you die. So what this ends up creating is it creates a situation where on your final lap, as you're approaching the finish line especially, you start mashing that boost in order to get ahead and to finish first. But at the same time, you run the risk, like, boy, oh boy, like, if I'm really low on energy because of all my boosting and I hit the wall, then it's over, and it's over right before the finish line. And it, for me anyway, it created this awesome, like, final lap kind of frantic dash to the finish. I don't know, like, did you, okay, first of all, I guess, I know, Arnie, you just said you didn't play F-Zero X. Anthony, what about you? Did you ever play it?
Yeah, I played it. It's funny because when I first played it, it was I was like, what the fuck is this? It was so crazy. No, because like yeah, I had played some Wipeout, but there was something just a little bit more this was just easier to get into, but it was still crazy with those loops and those tunnels, and like there was parts where you would go through that tunnel and you're spinning and you have no idea what's happening. You're just like in a washing machine. And when you come out of it, you're like, I hope I land on something, like, and you're just out. It was great just to see how the series had grown, like from this 4 players to like now you got 30 people on the track with you. It was pure Nintendo love, man. It was just pure Nintendo. But yeah, man, the first time I played it though, man, I was just like, yo, this is not, I didn't know what to expect really. So going from playing the Super Nintendo 16-bit version to now the Nintendo 64 version was just like, it was mind blowing. It was a night and day, but it was still so F-Zero though. You couldn't confuse this game for nothing other than an F-Zero game somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. I mean, we poop on the N64 a lot on this show, but F-Zero X, I think, is a fantastic showpiece for the system. I know you were a PlayStation guy, Geoff. I mean, you didn't really get your hands on F-Zero X very much, or did you? I didn't.
I was too busy playing Wipeout 3 and Roll Cage.
How does it control? I guess my question would be, like, a racer like this that does involve, like, really, like, you need to master these controls. how does it play on a stick as opposed to a D-pad?
You have to use
you
the
have to
stick.
use it.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got to use the analog stick because the D-pad means you just careen into a wall like immediately because it's just like max turn, max power, and then oh wait, that's not what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
It really does kind of require a little bit of fine-tuned control, so to speak. So much so that so F-Zero X, because of the Nintendo 64 analog controller, and again, we poop on that controller a lot too, but admittedly, the analog stick actually had a very wide range of motion, and it was very important for F-Zero specifically, so much so that eventually when they re-released this game on Virtual Console, I think on the Wii U, there was a segment of fans, one of which was the webmaster, I think for Nintendo Life. And he kind of started a campaign to Nintendo being like, yo, these controls are way off. This is nothing like the N64. You guys need to fix this because the N64 controller was perfect and this Wii U stuff is not cutting it.
Yeah.
And Nintendo actually patched their Virtual Console release on the Wii U of F-Zero X to kind of like make it feel more like that N64 analog stick.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, it only took us what, 2.5 years, and I finally said something nice about the N64 controller. So F-Zero X, some of the modes, they definitely expanded on it compared to the original F-Zero. Obviously, you have the Grand Prix mode, which was in the SNES version. It's in every F-Zero. But additionally, you also have time attack mode, practice mode, death race, which I thought was really cool. Basically, death race is just a race to eliminate all the other racers in as little time as possible. So once you've eliminated all the racers, then that's the time that you have recorded, which, you know, pretty cool little addition. Versus battle, which my preferred way of playing it, the 4-player split screen on F-Zero X it's mind-blowing. Like, it's still super silky smooth and just a fantastic way to play the game. We spent hours on 4-player split screen with this game. And another really cool version, I didn't even know about this until I researched it because I never actually finished the game. Most of the time that I spent with this game was on multiplayer. But there's another mode called the X Cup. And the X Cup is another Grand Prix mode, except that it is randomly generated tracks. It's kind of like the roguelike now of racing games. So in order to unlock it, you have to complete all the other Grand Prix Cups on expert mode, which, you know, I mean, that's a tall order. I'm not going to lie. And I have to try this out because I have F-Zero X. It can also be unlocked via a cheat code, which is really cool. You know, a nice kind of callback to the times before DLC, because obviously now I'd have to pay an additional $15 for it. So yeah, I'm gonna have to try that out because I don't know about you guys, but like, to me, a racing game with randomly generated tracks, and on top of that, like a really fast game like F-Zero, that's, I don't know, man, that sounds super
I can't believe
exciting.
we haven't seen something like that.
Absolutely.
So anyway, the soundtrack for F-Zero X, absolutely, it's very unique among the series in that it's very guitar heavy.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like this kind of heavy metal, hard rock feel to it. I loved it way back then. Now, you know, a little bit less. Now I kind of like, I hear the not so great sound quality of it, and I'm like, you know, whatever. But the remixes and the guitar were, you know, they're still pretty cool. I think they still hold up, even if they don't impress me quite as much as they did when I first heard it. So now F-Zero X, you know, as much as I love it, it's not perfect. As we know, the key to the F-Zero experience is that 60 frames per second. But in F-Zero X, in order to achieve this, the draw distance and the detail in the game is pretty much subpar. The draw distance, it doesn't affect the actual race. You still have enough time to see what's coming and to react. But with that said, it is noticeable. Like, you do see the backgrounds kind of pop up out of nowhere, pop up out of the fog, you know, because it's the Nintendo 64. And the detail on the tracks, the detail in the backgrounds, almost non-existent, to the point now where I don't know, if somebody was picking up this game now, they could almost say, oh, wow, what a minimalist experience. This is so cool.
It's very of its time, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But back then it was just kind of like, this doesn't look so great.
Yeah.
But of course, because it's an F-Zero game, like, you don't really have time to look at the backgrounds anyway, am I right?
Yeah. I was thinking about this too, and I mean, I'm pulling this out of my ass, so I could be completely wrong, but I feel like the N64 gets a lot of guff in retrospect for sticking to cartridges over discs, just because it made the games like more expensive, which is fair point. But it makes me curious about whether something like this could have been done this well on a disc. Like, I wonder if the lack of load times and stuff like that, because it was early in the life cycle of like disc-based games, like if they would have been able to pull it off this smoothly with a consistent frame rate and all that good stuff. That's
a good question. I don't know what the corollary is on the PlayStation, for example, because you have games like Wipeout that are very smooth, but do they have 30 other cars on the track? That's the question. I think something like Destruction Derby on the PlayStation might be kind of like your best comparison. It's not great, comparison.
That's a game from 95, isn't it? It's quite tough.
Yeah. Destruction Derby 2 in particular, it actually runs really, really smoothly and, actually holds up really well for a PlayStation game. But then again, it doesn't quite have the speed that F-Zero does. So, I don't know, Arnie. That's a good question, and I guess we'll never know the answer, eh?
We never will. It's a shame. But we have F-Zero X regardless, so...
Exactly. So, F-Zero X also... It had an expansion kit released. This, unfortunately, though, was only available in Japan since it was released for the 64 disk drive. Now, with that said, the expansion kit is it's widely praised for what it is. It introduces 12 new tracks, a vehicle editor, and a track editor. The track editor on the expansion kit actually is basically what the staff used in order to create the actual tracks in the game, which is pretty cool. Funnily enough, there's not a heck of a lot out there on F-Zero X as far as like interesting facts. It's not the first game of the series, and it was released on a system that wasn't as widely available. The one funny thing I was able to find is that Blood Falcon's vehicle, the Hellhawk, it was the Hellhawk in Japan, and then they renamed it Bloodhawk for Europe and North America. So this raises a point for me because, like, I don't know about you guys, but on the list of things that I'm afraid of, blood is way higher than hell.
I mean, the thing that bothers me is that I like the alliteration of Hellhawk, whereas Bloodhawk is just kind of like, bleh.
Like, what? Yeah. Are we really that afraid of the church in the early 90s? Like, what is going on here?
I mean, seeing that we live in hell now, we should be more afraid of blood, I think.
Yeah, we're all kind of acclimatized now, right?
Yeah.
Truly.
But are you more afraid of your blood or someone else's?
I would say 70 mine, 30 others.
I think I'm more afraid of somebody else's blood on someone. Because then I'm like, where did that come from? Like, at that point, I have questions. Like, we need to sit down and discuss.
For me, it's a matter of responsibility. Like, if I see blood on someone else, then I'm like, oh shit, what am I gonna do, right? Whereas if I see blood on myself, at least if I fail and like I die, then it's my fault. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
right,
and I'll be dead, and I won't have to live with the guilt. But boy, this is really taking a morbid turn, man. Yeah.
So, well, you asked the question.
So a couple other quick things here from F-Zero X. It does have Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 64. Funnily enough, that makes an appearance in the Joker Cup. The Grand Prix Cups in F-Zero X are Jack, Queen, King, and Joker, and the Joker Cup being the hardest one. And yeah, Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 64 makes an appearance there. And additionally, if you noticed, in F-Zero X, there's a pilot named James McCloud, and you wondered whether his name and look have anything to do with the Star Fox protagonist, Fox McCloud. Then you wouldn't be the only one who noticed that. James McCloud in Star Fox lore is actually Fox's father. So this led me down yet another rabbit hole. And Nintendo themselves have actually officially stated that neither of these things has anything to do with the other. James McCloud and F-Zero is one thing, Star Fox is another thing, and that's how it is. But like, there are references in virtually every F-Zero and Star Fox game that kind of like join one with the other. I'm not going to get into all the references. There are quite a few. I guess.
I am a James McCloud truther now.
Yeah.
Like, I believe. My theory is that he is a Highlander. And
wow. Another great movie reference. Come on.
So I have another question written here, but I think it'd be funniest if Geoff reads this to us. Geoff, if you want to pose the question here.
Sure.
Sure.
Since it's all but official that the human James is father to Fox, a man fox, does this mean James is a furry and the future is an erotic wonderland for all furries?
I mean, I feel like it's the only future we could aspire to at this point, you know? Like...
Oh my lord. It's the first thing I thought of. I apologize. I saw James McCloud and I'm like, wait a minute. James McCloud is a human. Fox is his son. How does that happen? And did he enjoy it? Moving on to F-Zero on the Game Boy Advance. I'm not going to go into too much detail here on all of these games because, you know, they do what they do. They don't necessarily push the envelope in any way. So F-Zero for the Game Boy Advance, starting off with Maximum Velocity. That was released between March and June of 2001, depending on which territory you lived in. And that was developed by ND Cube, which was a subsidiary of Nintendo. So it was around this time that Nintendo started licensing out their IPs to either individual developers or subsidiaries to be worked on. Following Maximum Velocity, you've got GP Legend. That was released in November 2003 in Japan. And then the next year, summer, fall for North America and Europe. And that game was developed by independent developer Suzak. Followed again very shortly by F-Zero Climax, and that was October 2004, so the year after, also developed by Suzak. So, notable, I thought, you know, the most interesting thing about the developer Suzak is that they worked on a puzzle game based on the Shin Megami Tensei Kids franchise, and that was for the Game Boy Advance. Now, I had no idea that there was like a Shin Megami Tensei Kids spin-off. Did you know this, Arnie?
I did, only because at one point I had looked up pretty much every game in the series to see like how insane I would have to be to collect them all. So Shin Megami Tensei Kids was on there. It really is. Like, if you ever look up like the Shin Megami Tensei franchise, they've pretty much dipped their toe into every subgenre of game that you could ever do. They did this. They've done rhythm games, obviously. They even did like a Pokemon ripoff that was,
of course,
but it was like, I'd have to look it up, and I think it is in the kids franchise, but it's like Holy White and something black. Like,
oh yeah,
you know, they've done everything, so not too surprised. The fact that the developer that did it also worked on F-Zero is a nice little overlap that I like. I like the 6 degrees of separation from Shin Megami Tensei.
Yeah, exactly. Also notable that they developed Settlers of Catan for the N-Gage, and I'm really just mentioning that because we have to mention the N-Gage as much as we can on this show. Yeah. The games themselves, the F-Zero games on the GPA, largely based on the Mode 7 enabled feel of the original F-Zero. So it's got that single background bitmap and it's skewed and scaled to provide the track, just like the SNES. So maximum velocity, the first one, it does bring back the boost system, but it's not related to the power meter like in F-Zero X. Basically, when you complete a lap, you get one boost, and then you can use it at any point, and you can store a maximum of 3 boosts. Otherwise, it's kind of a fairly standard update to the SNES game. Bit of a black sheep, so to speak, because even though it takes a lot of cues from the SNES game, Maximum Velocity really tried hard to be its own thing. So Captain Falcon, not in this game, all new characters, all new vehicles, all new tracks, just with one exception. I think it's Firefield that makes an appearance again in Maximum Velocity. So a few years later, they released GP Legend. And GP Legend, that one they brought back the original cast and they added in new characters as well, because that one was coinciding with the release of the anime on Japanese TV. So GP Legend introduces Rick Wheeler and Lisa Brilliant and Lucy Liberty. And I love these names, man. These names are great.
I'm just going to take a shot in the dark. Is Lucy Liberty American?
I should have looked it up, but I also feel like I don't have to, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Whenever she wins a race, she holds up a torch.
I was going to say she holds a stone slab and a torch.
So, much like with F-Zero GX, there is a story mode in GP Legend, and it consists of missions that don't necessarily involve finishing first in the race. So your mission could be to finish ahead of a certain opponent, or destroy a certain opponent, or help an ally, or what have you. They involve, obviously, moving forward on a track, but it's not like an actual race. The boost system from F-Zero X returns, so does the combat for GP Legend. And GP Legend also includes what they call the Zero Test mode, which almost kind of reminds me of a more fun way of doing the licenses from Gran Turismo. It's like these little mini challenges where they take a section of the track and then you have to complete it in X amount of time. The bonus, of course, compared to Gran Turismo is that you don't have to do the Zero Test mode to access everything in the game. So I thought that was a pretty cool little thing. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, in Japan, it was actually one of the few games that supported the GBA e-reader. So, it had courses and it had vehicles that were available to download from the actual cards. And this functionality was not brought over to the West for whatever reason. In the West, we just had, I think, Mario 3 and a whole bunch of Pokemon stuff, which is probably why I never heard of the e-reader, come to think of it.
Some of the Nintendo classics on the GBA, I believe, also had, I think Excite Bike may have had some, but I don't know if only in Japan or also in North America.
Yeah, Japan just had more of it, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
So, as far as the GBA games, though, it finishes up with Climax, F-Zero Climax. That's what happens when 2 F-Zeros get together to create a new baby F-Zero.
I wonder what the F stands for now.
So Climax released Japan only, not brought over to North America. It's also tied into the anime series. The story mode is actually removed from Climax, which personally I'm a fan of. Basically, you just have the option of unlocking snippets from the anime instead during Climax. The spin attack is re-added in Climax, which is pretty cool. And it has, it has a lot of cool modes. At first I was like, man, they released this game a year later. Like, how much better could it be? No, they really did add quite a bit here. The survival mode, which ordinarily kind of makes me yawn in a game. In this game, the survival mode, it includes things like death races and like slalom challenges and all this other kind of stuff that I thought was really interesting. And most importantly for Climax, it actually has a track editor instead. So much like the N64 version, you can make your own tracks, share them via link cable, and so on and so forth. So, funnily enough, though, with Climax, sold pretty poorly in Japan. I think I think there might have been a problem with oversaturation there, because you had GX releasing the year before, you had GP Legend releasing the year before, and then it's like, oh my goodness, another F-Zero game so soon. So it sold very few copies. And like we alluded to at the beginning of the show, man, oh man, like it is expensive now. Like, Geoff, was this the one that you were thinking of?
Yeah. I once offered someone £70 for it, and they were very polite not to laugh at me. I see it now. Like, if you want it boxed, of course, I think it's going to set you back way over $200. Way over.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's just a game that, as you say, Paul, like, it came a year after the last one. It's a game no one wanted, and it's like, who's going to buy it? And then they only released it in Japan, and it's like, now today, I don't know who wants to spend that kind of money on an F-Zero game.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It's like, if you've got it, what are you going to do with it?
It's going to sit
Give
on...
it to me, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
I'll play it.
Merry Christmas, buddy. Yeah, no, I was interested in it insofar as it was an F-Zero game that I hadn't heard of until I started, doing a little bit more reading. And yeah, man, that eBay rabbit hole, that was the first thing I did. I went onto it and I was like, son of a bitch. Like, oh well. So much for my complete F-Zero collection. I
would say so. F-Zero, just, I know we don't want to spend too much time on the GBA games, but Maximum Velocity was the launch. I think it was almost a launch title, if not.
It was a launch title. It was.
And I remember my friend getting it, and it was one of those games that made you realize you had a SNES in your hands. And it was great for that, but I never really remember going back to it too often. I got a game called Advanced GTA, which was basically Gran Turismo on the GBA, which I really loved.
Wow,
yes. And that was about getting licenses and car parts and stuff. And like, now I think Maximum Velocity is one of the cheapest GBA games you can pick up. So
sure is.
If you got a way to play GBA karts and you don't have it, and you're interested in racing games, then I think it's worth picking up the first one. It's not bad.
No, I mean, it's an F-Zero game. There's kind of a baseline level of quality there, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, like you said, Geoff, don't want to spend too much time on the GBA stuff. We'll take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we'll get on to F-Zero GX and the legacy that the series has left behind. Okay, we're back, and we are back now with F-Zero GX, which is the last console game released in the series. The last actual game released in the series was Climax, so kind of aptly titled, I suppose. But the last one on console is GX or AX in the arcade, because they were developed concurrently. So released between July and October, depending on the territory, in 2003, and that was for the GameCube and, like I just said, in the arcade. So it's built on the GameCube-friendly Triforce arcade system. And that arcade system was actually a partnership between Namco, Sega, and Nintendo, hence, of course, Triforce. And within this partnership, Namco and Sega would develop arcade and GameCube games based on Nintendo's intellectual properties. So since the arcade hardware, the Triforce arcade hardware, was basically a kind of a glorified GameCube, ports to the home console were actually very easy. So, like, I don't know, the only Triforce arcade game I've ever seen is Mario Kart Arcade, and I was actually even surprised to see that. Did you guys, like, have you guys ever seen any of these? I think they did Virtua Striker 4 and some other Japanese games that we never would have seen. Like, have you guys ever seen these?
No, outside of the Mario Kart, I never really noticed these. I definitely never seen F-Zero though in the arcade though.
No, I would have seen. I remember playing the F-Zero one in Akihabara
Oh, wow.
So I did. Around that time, I was probably going to Japan at least once a year. So I definitely was always hitting up the Sega arcades. So I'm pretty sure I played it. But at the time, you don't realize that what you're playing is something quite, I guess you would call it special when you're talking about those three companies all coming together. At the time, you just go, "Oh, cool, F-Zero in the arcade, sweet." You don't think I better remember this moment because in 17 years I'm going to be talking about F-Zero. I would have taken a photo and everything.
I know, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, "Oh my god, Geoff, what was it like?" And I'm like, "There's no way you're going to know that." Like,
yeah, you're just there. You're just doing stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Funnily enough, though, actually, you can play the Mario Kart arcade GP mode on the Wii. There is a homebrew application available, so you can play the arcade version on the Wii at home, which I thought was pretty interesting. Wow. I mean, I'm never going to do it myself because when I see the words homebrew application, I can see hours of my life melting away. But for those of you who are enthusiasts and have the patience for that, yeah, it's out there. So F-Zero GX/AX, developed by Amusement Vision, formerly Sega AM4, responsible for titles like Virtual Racing, Virtua Cop, Sega Rally, House of the Dead. Like, this is just a murderer's row of hits here. And then, of course, Super Monkey Ball. And then they reformed and worked on the Yakuza series.
Wow.
So we've definitely, I know, right? This is like an all-star team.
Yeah, that seems like a straight line trajectory from like Virtual Racing to Yakuza
via Super Monkey Ball.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, right?
With a little detour to House of the Dead in the middle, right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
The first game, F-Zero GX, jointly developed by Sega and Nintendo. Kind of a landmark, really. Even when I just boot it up and the first screen is Sega and Nintendo on the screen, it's kind of cool, right? Like, for those of us who grew up during the 16-bit era and, these hated rivals and all that, and then, now they're friends.
Yeah. It's always nice to see that happen, especially I guess it's nice that it's a good game.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't, it'd be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
We'd be like, this was a mistake. I knew it all along.
So F-Zero GX, directed by Hiroyuki Sakamoto. He would later become director for some of our most beloved Yakuza games, Yakuza 6 and Kiwami 2. And he was also the lead designer for Binary Domain, which is a game that we've mentioned a couple times on the show before, yeah. And then you have Takuya Imamura. He was the producer for the game, so not just the artist anymore. He's now in charge of supervising the production. So basically, Amusement Vision would work on the game, and then they would report to Imamura and Shigeru Miyamoto. So Imamura, not just drawing anymore.
Yeah.
Interesting to note on this game, it's neither a console port to the arcade, and it's also not like an arcade port to console. GX, it's actually a game that's jointly developed, and it's jointly developed to be playable on both the arcade and the GameCube systems. So the idea behind it was to develop this game and make it compatible with the GameCube memory card so that people could take the GameCube memory card home with, parts that they earned in the arcade game, modify their car with those parts, and then take that car and play the car that they made at home in the arcade. Now, in reality, I don't know how successful that was. My guess is that it probably wasn't that successful, because you have to have a pretty big install base for the home system, which the GameCube didn't have. And, I mean, I've never seen an F-Zero AX arcade game. I know Geoff saw one, but I mean, that's in Japan's. Oh, you have?
Yes, I played one at MagFest, I believe. Somebody had brought their own F-Zero AX machine.
Oh,
so
my
I got to play
God.
That with the tilting
that is
seat
so cool.
and the... Wow. And it was amazing. I played it a bunch. I was like... I was terrible at it, like I'm terrible at every F-Zero
Of
game,
course.
but I was like, this is just cool to like sit in and play.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, we've talked a lot about different racing games, and I just want to throw another one here because when I saw this, because I did not know, even when I played it, I didn't know there was like a slot for your GameCube memory card. I miss that, man. I miss like stupid little gimmicks like that in arcade games. Like I remember in high school, my friends would like, or people I knew would go play Initial D, the arcade game, and that you would have like a little card that you'd put in and take out and bring home. And I was like, I don't know, stuff like that makes me smile. Like it's so unnecessary but so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And man, especially with Initial D, like I've got such a hankering right now to play Initial D. I've got to go do it. I picked it up when I was in Japan for the PlayStation 3. Anyway, that's a whole other digression and perhaps a conversation not for the F-Zero episode. So with F-Zero GX, just from reading interviews, it actually appears that they kind of realized that F-Zero wouldn't ever really be a game that could compete financially, sales-wise, with like the Marios and the Zeldas. But F-Zero does have a very hardcore fan base that loved the game. And so with GX, they really wanted to like focus on that speed and the F-Zero experience in order to kind of appeal to the hardcore fans, which I mean, I think they were successful with personally, even if the game might be a little bit on the difficult side.
Yeah. I think F-Zero has a nice like design philosophy behind it, which is with every new game, it seems they're just like, let's just make it faster. Let's just put more of the fast thing, like put it in there and make it go faster. And I like that. You know, it's like, don't reinvent the wheel. Just like make it do crazier stuff until we break it, I guess.
And I will say they came pretty close to breaking it in GX, and we'll get to that in a second. As far as the game is concerned, funnily enough, like they weren't really focused on bringing any kind of new gameplay elements. I think F-Zero X kind of, I don't want to say perfected it, but there's just not a lot you can add after F-Zero X. So mainly what they focused on was the customization aspects, the story mode, and just the overall presentation, graphically, sound, and so on. The customizations are really, really deep in this game. The story mode, I mean, the interviews are
the best.
The interviews are hilarious. Like I'm playing it last night, and obviously I picked Captain Falcon. And so when you finish a Grand Prix, you know, there's a guy on the F-Zero news station, and he's interviewing Captain Falcon, and you can select which question. There's 3 questions you can select for Captain Falcon. You select one, and then he answers it. And then, you know, ostensibly you'd complete the Grand Prix mode again to ask the next question. Yeah. And so the question I asked was, Captain Falcon, your rivals are howling for revenge. What do you have to say to them? And Captain Falcon's answer was, come on, then. And then the interviewer was like, thanks for the interview, Captain Falcon.
That's that Michael Jordan 97, 98.
I know, the questions, they're so fun to just like mess around with. Like, it's like real simple shit too. It's like, you know, hey, Captain Falcon, what do you think the key was to winning? Coming in first place. Thanks.
Another funny little thing I found here, the racer Deathborn in the game, he pilots a vehicle called the Dark Schneider. And I don't know, Geoff, like when you see Dark Schneider, do you get the reference?
Not at all.
Not at all. It's from the old manga and then made anime called Bastard. Dark Schneider is like the main antagonist. Gosh, it's been so long since I've seen it.
Right.
And in Bastard, the references in that manga, it's all like heavy metal bands and stuff like that. The land that they're in is called Metallicana, which like only in Japan, right?
Yeah.
And so Dark Schneider in itself is a reference to Dee Schneider, the frontman for Twisted Sister. Man, this can only happen in Japan.
It really can.
Where you have F-Zero basing a vehicle on, you know, a frontman for a hair metal band, really, is what it comes down to.
I think it's partially this whole thing that when you become successful enough to make those kinds of decisions anywhere but Japan, there's always, I think, this fear of not being taken seriously. And so you're like, well, I can't do that anymore. Like, that is childish and I've forgotten about it. And in Japan, it's like, I've been waiting 30 years for this one moment. And now I'm going to do all of it.
So the game itself, again, just from playing it recently, it still looks great. It really does. Like, the fact that it's standard def hurts it a little bit, but man, I can play this game and not really kind of have that feeling that you get when playing a lot of, like, even PS2 games. You know what I mean? Still looks fantastic. And one thing I actually didn't really get into, and I started exploring it last night a little bit, because back then, you just play the game, and the customization wasn't really my bag. But I didn't know if you guys knew this, but you can draw, like, by hand, pixel by pixel emblems. Whoa. And they're kind of like stickers that you put on your hover car. So immediately I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to draw a cartoon penis and put it on my hover car. Like, that was like the first thing I thought of. Like, when you guys were going over the outline, what did you think? Like, Anthony, what are you going to draw on your emblem?
Man, I'm a terrible artist, so I'm so glad I never came across this. This would have been bad. I was going to draw an emblem. That's funny. It's got to be the logo for Twisted Sister. I mean, that's the only way to go with this, right? That's it.
Oh, man. What about Geoff, Arnie? You guys have anything interesting that you think of?
I have one, but it's going to be the worst thing to describe on a podcast, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. If you've ever, like, been in high school, that, like, S symbol that everybody always drew in, like, the late 90s, early 2000s, do you know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You have no idea what I'm talking about? Like, if you Google S symbol, it's just like you draw 3 lines, and then 3 lines under that, and then you draw a triangle and some lines to make it like a block S, essentially.
This is awesome, because it's not that often from talking to Arnie that I realize just how old I am. Yeah. But this is one of those moments. Thanks, dude.
Just give me 1 second.
Oh, I got it.
I just
never seen that.
I just pulled it up. Yep, that's it.
This thing.
Yeah, no, not something that I would have been aware of.
Hopefully the audience knows what I'm talking about.
I think probably for me, I remember when Jet Set Radio was like, you can put your own art on. I was like, oh yeah, man, I'm an artist. I could definitely put some sort of graffiti art going in. And after 2 minutes realizing I ain't no artist, there's no way. I'm just gonna download a photo of my football team's badge and make that.
There you go.
And that's exactly what I would have done with this. I think it would have been an Arsenal emblem done.
I'm going to say that's better than the cartoon penis, personally, but...
Is it, though?
So,
Is it
so
really?
F-Zero GX, I would say the largest criticism of this game actually is for its difficulty. It has a very arcadey feel, owing probably to Sega's development. A lot of the tracks are very easy to fall off of. And it's kind of ironic, because in reading interviews here, this actually, in a way, runs contrary to Sega's vision for the game, which was to make a game that was accessible to everyone. Because at that time, Gran Turismo had swept through and changed everything, and racing games were more starting to cater to the adult kind of gearheads. So it's kind of weird that they're making this accessible game, but still really, really hard. Have any of you guys played this recently? I gotta ask.
No.
Oh yeah,
Anthony?
No, not recently. No,
I'm actually a little bit surprised, because I know you guys were playing the original F-Zero last night. I thought maybe one of you might have been able to pick up GX as well. I did, like I mentioned, play GX quite a bit, and I have to admit, it's hard, man. Like you fall off the track. Depending on the track, I think the reason I remember it not being quite as difficult as it is because I played on a lot of tracks where you don't fall off very much. But there is a version of Mute City. It's Mute City. I'm just going to call it Mute City 2. And it has a lot of jumps. And oh my God, like you have to practice the track. Like there's just no way. A lot of the other tracks, I can just kind of like jump in and finish, you know, between 5th place and 1st place pretty easily.
Yeah.
Even on, I only ever play on normal level. I didn't play on novice. And then as soon as I got to Mute City 2, I was just falling off constantly.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit, this is ridiculous.
That is a thing about it that I do like, though, that when you, because I was looking up videos of it, and obviously everybody on YouTube is like a pro gamer. So when you see someone like nail that, like jump off the track, land on another piece of the track, like that's a sight to behold. Like that is really like brain breaking for me, because I'm sort of like, if you fall off the track, like it's over, you're done, you fucked up. But in here, it's like, oh no, like this is the way to play this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, once you practice the track and it gets used to it, here's what I'll say about it. The difficulty, I understand, can be off-putting and fair enough. But, like, playing F-Zero GX the past couple days, I cannot remember the last time I played a game where my hands sweat as much as they did. Because it is a nail-biter, an absolute nail-biter. And especially on that Mute City 2 track or any other track where you do a lot of jumps and you can fall off easily. Like you've completed a couple laps, you have to complete one more, you've done those 2 laps perfectly, and you're trying to negotiate your way into a top spot and you're trying not to fall. Dude, it is tense. Absolutely tense. And there is no other game that I've played in recent history that accomplishes what that game just did. I thought it was awesome. So, you know, if you're off put by the difficulty, I get it. But, you know, it's not a baby game. It's not a baby game for baby gamers. You have to show up.
You mean it's not like Pokemon?
Hey.
I used to play this game a lot, multiplayer, and that's a big gist of how I used to play the game was just multiplayer. And it was crazy. Like everybody in the room would just lose their minds, like, cause it was going so fast. But after a few minutes of you just kind of focusing, you kind of get a grasp on what's happening in front of you. But like, and it was fun. It was fun playing with like a bunch of people, but like, it was crazy though. The speed of this game was just intense.
Oh my God. Yeah. And multiplayer. Look, I mean, we can say this about pretty much every game ever made. The multiplayer was amazing, right? Like that was kind of the way to do it. And it still is. I played GX as recently as I think about a year and a half ago with some friends, and we were at it for an hour, and it was great fun. So don't really need to spend too much more time on GX here. Wrapping it up then with F-Zero, the legacy that it's kind of left behind here. Now, even though we haven't seen a new F-Zero game since 2003, it doesn't mean that the game, 2004 with Climax rather, it doesn't mean that the series isn't on the radar anymore. We do have imitators. I think the most recent ones that look, you know, a lot like it, Fast RMX on the Switch, Redout on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch. I don't think either of those is F-Zero, but man, I haven't tried them, but they both look pretty cool. And it looks like that's going to be all we get, too. Just from reading interviews again, Miyamoto has expressed reluctance to outsource production of Nintendo's IPs to third-party developers anymore, which, you know, makes sense, right? Like, you have like the F-Zero games on the GBA. Even GX, to an extent, it was, you know, kind of more of a Sega game than a Nintendo game, just in feel. So I'm not too surprised that they don't want to be licensing out their IPs anymore. It's really the most valuable part of their business. And somebody asked Miyamoto, a French magazine asked Miyamoto back in 2012, you know, hey, when are we going to see a new F-Zero game? We love that game. And Miyamoto was like, what? People like F-Zero? Why? So, you know, between that and the fact that they're on record pretty much saying that GX is like kind of the logical conclusion for the series. Like they don't really know what else to do with it. I guess, I mean, you can just update the graphics and blah, blah, blah. You could
just follow what they do for Wipeout. Just give us more of the same with current graphics. and capabilities. Like, I don't online gaming. Like, I don't. Obviously, I'm not a developer, but that to me would possibly make them some good money. I mean, we see it all the time. As soon as Nintendo releases its own IP, like if you look what Animal Crossing is doing, everyone's picking it up.
Oh boy,
everyone. And I'm sure everyone won't pick up F-Zero, but I still think, see the amount of people who've been talking about Streets of Rage 4. I'm sure just as many people are going to be interested in the new F-Zero.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. Even if it's just like a remaster of GX.
Yeah, exactly.
I would love that with online play. Yeah.
I think you could easily, I say easily, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I think you could conceivably put F-Zero X and GX on a Switch cart and be like, F-Zero collection, here you go, have a ball. Like, get away from me for a little bit. But I think that F-Zero exists solely to make Metroid fans not feel bad about their own series, like their own release schedule woes. And in that sense, I think they're doing a great job.
Well, good job, Nintendo. That's that is something.
But if they wanted to come out with another, like a sequel of some sorts, I say they go the reverse direction. I say they make it slower. That would blow everybody's mind right there. Don't make it faster, just make it slower.
I'm just looking at you right now, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with you. Make it slower. How dare you? Do you guys think it'll return, though? Like, I don't know. Anthony, what do you think?
I mean, I would love for it to return, but if they're saying it's not going to come back and they're saying they're not really seeing a reason to bring it back, I don't think we're going to see it. Nintendo's pretty good like that. Like, if they say they're not going to bring something back, they just sit on it.
I could see it coming back at some point. Nintendo's not the kind of company that I think would go that easy route, because I could definitely see some other big-time developer just like, F-Zero VR, here you go, like in a year or two. But I think the Switch gives them a reason to bring it back, because I think people like a game like F-Zero, I think would be a hit portably. Like, if I could carry around a racing game like that I could just pop up when I'm in the bus, on the subway, do a few laps and be like, okay, I had a good time, like, put it back in the case for now.
I could never play that game on the subway, because I would be the guy like losing. Oh my god! Oh shit! Geoff, your thoughts? Come back.
For me, it's really hard to get into the mind of Nintendo, isn't it? Like, you really don't.
It really is.
Like, for the life of me, I don't get why Animal Crossing is as popular as it is. But they've struck gold. They struck gold, and they are going to rinse and repeat until the cows come home. And that's just something that, and we kind of lambast Konami for it, for like prioritizing being profitable over prioritizing giving us what we want. And Nintendo haven't been afraid to kind of go, right, Splatoon now makes more money than this series, so Splatoon is where we focus. But in 10 years' time, it might all turn around and reverse, and they'll go, right, it's been, and I don't want to scare anyone here, it's been 50 years since F-Zero, maybe we should do something.
Could you imagine the 50th anniversary? Jeez.
Well, the 20th anniversary is coming up soon, isn't it, for GX?
Exactly. That's crazy.
Crazier things have happened.
Exactly. But I mean, I was talking about that, the Star Wars Pod Racer has been remastered. I don't see why, apart from obviously Nintendo are very careful who they give their intelligent rights to kind of develop for. I do feel like you guys are saying, there could be someone out there who can take it off their hands and go, don't worry, we'll look after it and take care of it. We'll kind of, we'll take on the cost of development. Because we think there's enough of an install base. So you never know. I would say no, though. I'd say we're done.
Yeah, I would say we're done, too. Just, boy, oh boy, the feeling I get from what I've read, and just kind of the overall lack of any kind of buzz, aside from, us doing an episode on F-Zero. It seems like it's dead, but,
But what a ride.
We'll always have GX. Yeah.
We'll always have the memories.
And we'll always have the first 6 modes.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll always have the first 6 modes that have nothing to do with F-Zero. All right, guys, that pretty much wraps it up for today. Again, everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to find us, you can find us at regionfreegamers.com. And if you want to come chat with us, we're always happy to hear from you. If you have any ideas for the show or just general comments, Instagram at Region Free Gamers Podcast. We're also on Twitter, where because of the character limit, we are at Region Free Gamer. And if you're going old school with email, regionfreegamers@gmail.com. I guess that's it, guys. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much.
You abstract Hercules.